Commonwealth's attorneys and I have concluded that the NCAA sanctions were overreaching and unlawful.
Someone's got to develop a product that you and I as a consumer are going to want to buy.
The country needs a comprehensive energy plan.
Hello and welcome to this edition of For the Record. Our guest today is the author of this book, Fourth and Long, The Fight for the Soul of College Football. John Bacon joins us on For the Record. John, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Steve.
John, introduce yourself a little bit to the watchers of the show. Talk about your background a little bit.
Sure. I was born and raised in Michigan. I went to school there, so
Immediately the red flags are going up. No,
I'm
just
sure they
teasing.
are. I'm sure they are. But got to come clean here,
Sure.
man. I used to coach at the Penn State Hockey School 20 years ago, so I got some ties here. I've written for the Detroit News full-time, then freelance for the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Time, ESPN, all those pretty much. Written 6 books. This is the 6th book on sports and business, but most of them, the last 3, have all been on college football.
The title of this, The Fight for the Soul of College Football. And in this book, we're going to talk primarily about Penn State, but there are 3 other schools, Northwestern, Ohio State, and Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
What was the thought process behind first the title and then the schools that you wrote about?
Sure. The previous book is called 3 and Out, Rich Rodriguez and the Michigan Wolverines in the Crucible of College Football. That could have gone better for everybody, of course. But in the process of that, I got complete access to the program. I was in there with the players. Of course, I talked to a lot of the fans also. But it occurred to me that the student-athlete part of this equation works a lot better than advertised. For all the cynicism, and Lily Tomlin's got a great line. She said, no matter how cynical you get, you just can't keep up. And I was kind of getting cynical until I met the players and realized, no, this thing works actually quite well. And then I started realizing we need to pull back one more step, get more of the Big Ten in this. Talk to the 2 most, I think, neglected groups in the equation, the players and the fans. No one ever talks to them. When they kill the Michigan-Notre Dame rivalry, it's not because the players and the fans of both schools says, please end this.
Right.
You know, it was because you can make a few more bucks doing something else.
Of course.
You add Maryland and Rutgers, you know, how many fans are screaming for this? How many players are screaming for this? They're not consulted. So my whole idea was you've got the players and the fans on this side increasingly, and you got the guys who are running it on this side. You know, oftentimes the league commissioners in many cases, certainly the NCAA, the suits, if you will, although we're both wearing one today. And I felt the tension between these is getting greater and greater. And I wanted to visit the players and the fans before this beautiful national park, as I see it, Grand Canyon, gets all sold out and cheaped up the way the Niagara Falls is now.
When was this book sent to the publisher? Because, you know, in the last month or so, 6 weeks, other things have broken with college football. So what's the time frame on this book start to finish?
We started it April 20th of 2012. That's the day before Penn State's spring game. I was here for the groundbreaking ceremony of the new hockey rink, of course, which is now up and running, as you well know. So it was a pretty fast and furious pace, about 5-6 months of research and about 4 or 5 months of writing, which is a good way to ruin your life. But we kept on putting it to bed, if you will, and then stuff kept on happening.
Right.
And we're kind of joking that the football gods, you know, are making our cup runneth over. Stop. We have enough. We don't need any more material.
Well,
and of course, more's come out since.
And the way things are going, there could be a part 2 of Fourth and Long.
Oh, I think that the publisher's already talking about this.
That's good. Well, let's start with, first of all, the access that you were given to the Penn State program at a time when Penn State, in general, wasn't really happy with talking to anybody that was writing or recording anything. How did that come to fruition?
That, Steve, is a great question, and one it's not easy to answer, actually. I mean, given all the negative press, some fair but a lot unfair, no question about it. I'm saying this as an outsider. This is where it helps me being not from Penn State. I could see that this was not the Penn State that I knew. I mean, what happened was a tragedy, and no one I've talked to spins it any other way.
Right.
In fact, the great line from Mike Motti is, you know, most of the team didn't even know who Sandusky was before he was arrested. And his line, it's in the book, and it may sound a little direct, but he said in the old days at the Center County Courthouse, they used to hang guys up in the front yard. He said, give me the rope.
Right.
we'll do this ourselves.
Sure.
But by getting access through Bill O'Brien was the whole key. He'd read my previous book called...
The coach is a fan of your writing, and it was about the Bo Schembechler book, correct?
You know your stuff. Well done, Steve. The man does his homework, people. I want you to know this. Bo's Lasting Lessons, he'd already read it 3 or 4 times. It's been a bit of a Bible for him, I guess. And I did have to ask him about that. But so he already knew me. I sat down with Josh Brandwine. He's the women's coach here at Penn State for hockey. He remembered me from 20 years ago at the hockey camps, so there I am talking to Bill, and we hit it off very quickly, and I had to.
Sure.
Because within 24 hours I'm in the locker room for the spring game, and that's when the whole thing takes off. Now, I'm sure an outsider would say, man, Penn State is crazy to let anybody in at this point. As you just said, tensions were very high, to say the least, and things were sensitive. And I think Penn State fans will be very glad that he did. Because the Penn State I saw is not the Penn State that Mark Emmert saw. When he talks about a football culture at Penn State, let me tell you this, having been inside that culture, in the locker room during halftime, team dinners, team meetings, in classes with the players, I will put, if I have a choice between the culture of the NCAA run by Mark Emmert and the culture of Penn State football, I will not hesitate to choose the latter.
Well, I think a lot of people here would feel the same way.
I'm sure.
Mark Emmert is not a big popular guy here in a positive way.
And even as an outsider, I agree.
Mm-hmm. Now, after Bill O'Brien, you sat down and talked with Michael Motti and Michael Zordich, which is ironic because they lived together, correct? Mm-hmm. Okay. They were sort of the glue that held this team together at the time when it was free reign of taking players and leaving. We'll talk about some of those in a little bit. But you talked to Motti and Zordich a lot. Individually, talk about each one of them and the way they tried to keep things together.
Sure. I didn't have too many interviews with Bill. I had quite a few. It was mainly fly on the wall stuff, following him around. With Motti and Zordich, we had a standing Wednesday night appointment, basically. It would run 2, 3, 4 hours some nights. And Mike Motti told one of the newspapers here in the area that it was like a therapy session for those guys, and thank God for that. I'm glad it was not difficult. I always said at any time, you guys need to pull out. Go ahead. Mm-hmm. The book's not more important than what you guys are doing. But they were great about it. They're forthcoming. I think they felt it was cathartic because they'd had all the stuff bottled up inside for so long that they really couldn't say. After the Sandusky stuff and so on, no one around here can say a peep. So to finally get it off their chest what was really going on, how they really saw things, what Penn State football was really all about, as they experienced it, was, I think, for them refreshing, and for the readers it certainly should be. And in that process, of course, I think Penn State looks better and better when people find out what's really going on. And back to your follow-up question, what's really going on that I discovered, and I think readers, even avid Penn State fans who followed the whole thing, and Lord knows you're on the inside, I was stunned how close the whole program was to falling apart, as you described it. Within an hour after Emmert's press conference, half the underclassmen were telling the seniors, we're out of here. We're all done. And Pete Massaro says in the book, I thought that day was the end of Penn State football.
Let's stop right there. That's a good stopping point. Back with more of For the Record. John Bacon is our guest. Back with more after this. And welcome back to For the Record. Our guest is John Bacon, the author of Fourth and Long, The Fight for the Soul of College Football. We stopped, John, at the point where underclassmen were allowed, and all the players were actually allowed, without any penalty. Normally, if you transfer to a school, you lose a year of eligibility, you have to sit out a year. For some reason, the powers that be of the NCAA decided, oh no, everybody come on in and help yourself to the cookie jar. The team falling apart, yes. Let's start right there and talk about how Motti and Zordich fought to keep this going.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. The NCAA, there are some benign reasons for this, but as usual, the NCAA did not think about the obvious unintended consequences that are going to happen within minutes, and they did, to rescinding the transfer rule for these players. You can go anywhere you want, of course, and the coaches can re-recruit you from around the country, which they took full advantage of, as you well know. You were there in the parking lot. I mean, within 24 hours, you got 100 coaches in the parking lot camped out. It was not a great testimonial for the values.
It was a great week for the hotel people, though, in State College to have the outside people at that time of year.
And an otherwise slow week in August,
exactly,
right?
Yes.
In late July, July 23rd is what it would have been. But yeah, so these guys know that, I mean, the phones are blowing up. They're getting calls. Motti's high school coach in Louisiana got 40 calls that day. I mean, who knows how to get a hold of that guy?
Right.
It's just amazing how fast this happened. And of course, the coaches are all right there. They woke up Tuesday morning, 24 hours after the sanctions. Zordich at 6 o'clock in the morning. They both look at their phones, and Zordich just looks at Motti and says, dude. And they both knew exactly where they were. They went make a beeline for Craig Fitzgerald's office, the strength coach's office, of course, and brought down Bill O'Brien, who had no problem running down immediately. They figured, okay, this is a panic situation. What do we got? They started making a list of the guys they heard were going to leave, the guys that heard they're going to stay, and it was not a happy list. They said that even if half the guys who were on the leave list actually left, you might not even have a team to play Ohio University when the season opens. That's how ridiculous this situation was. They made a playbook. They started getting out the legal pads. You're going to call that guy. You're going to call that guy. You're going to call that guy. Visit this guy. Call his girlfriend. Call his roommate. I mean, they fanned out and got other guys involved. And, of course, Urschel was big in this. Jordan Hill was fantastic. Matt McGloin. The list goes on and on. And man, they pounded this thing. That whole first week, Zordish and Marty and the other seniors, they were getting like 4 or 5 hours of sleep a night. That's it. Desperate to keep this team together. And
ironic, isn't it, not to stop you, ironic is it that the players did a better job with crisis intervention than the Board of Trustees did when everything came down the pike.
It is interesting, isn't it?
Yes.
I thought that was true too. A great quote from Mike Farrell. He said the only thing the trustees got right in the last 12 months was covering their butts with a free report. And when he asked his dad if he should include that quote in the book, his dad, a proud Penn State alum, says, "I insist that you do."
Excellent.
And a great quote from Jim Bernhardt, who's the right-hand man for Bill O'Brien here in the building, you know that. He said, "What I'll always remember is the players handle the situation better than most of the adults." This is this should be taught in business school.
Right.
How the grassroots guys rally to save what's theirs. And in the process, by the way, here is another major irony. In the process, when you take away the bowl games, the scholarships, you allow them to transfer, and let's face it, some of the guys in that parking lot, other teams, were offering them money. And that's no question about it. All right? They turned down all that to stay, no bowl game, 91% graduation rate, want to be with their teammates. They proved in that process that they believe more in the values of the student athlete than the NCAA who makes the rules. This is incredible.
I want to go back to what you said. Everyone knows that there were coaches in parking lots willing to pay players on a team that's being punished for off-the-field activities. People are already breaking the rules. That's a little bit of a reverse black and white through the looking glass kind of situation.
The whole NCAA is a house of mirrors, honestly. I think I used that phrase in the book at some point. And the players get it. I mean, Mike at one point looks at me and says, it explains to me how they pay you money at other schools that he was offered. And Zordish was offered money as well. Most of the players at Penn State, were blue chippers offered money by somebody along the way. They came here for a handshake and a scholarship. That's all Joe Paterno ever offered you, and that scene's in the book also.
And there have been discussions, some of the things in the book about what kids, sort of Joe's approach to getting someone to come to Penn State. It was pretty much are you or aren't you, basically, I believe, is the way. Was it Marty or Zordish? It was
Marty, and Zordish does the same thing, but Marty talks about it. He's there talking to Joe Paterno. Before he does, he meets Zordish for the first time. They're 18. He says, "Dude, are you coming or not?" That's the first thing he ever says. Not, "Hello, how you doing?" Right. "Dude, are you coming or not?" And Marty thinks about it, says, "You know what? That guy's right." So he's talking to Paterno afterwards, Joe Paterno, of course, and he said, "Everyone else talked to me about how great I was, all the things I'm going to get, this wonderful situation we're going to give you. All Joe says, you're going to have a great opportunity at Penn State to get a fantastic education, play some serious football. Are you in or aren't you?" That's it. And handshake was the deal, and it's done. And he said that was completely different than everyone else, and that's how I was raised by my dad, Rich Marty, who, of course, is a Joe Paterno disciple.
Right. You spent the year with the team. What are the team's thoughts, and what did you pick up on what their thoughts were about the Sandusky situation in general, and also with Mike McQueary and the way Joe Paterno was let go?
We didn't get too much into that, but I can tell you as far as the whole thing goes, they were as stunned as everybody else. They certainly realized who the real victims were. They never lost sight of that. These are pretty mature guys who recognize there are bigger things in a football game, and they know that. They're also very careful about talking about any of this because they know how it might play if it gets twisted by somebody else. But like I said, most of them didn't know who Sandusky was. They said, good riddance. And, if he wasn't enabled, and that'll come out in court cases, we're going to find out soon enough, then, whatever happens to those guys happens to those guys. What they wanted everyone to realize is this has nothing to do with us. We came here for the right values. We are exercising the right values. And we got coaches in our parking lot, who'll give you a credit card for 4 years, and you're going to rack up $100,000 on it. I've been to the Starbucks with Pete Massaro, the whole scene with Pete Massaro. Or he told me the story, that he's there and the lady wants to give him a free latte, and the manager comes over and says, "You can't do that, you can't do that." And Pete wasn't asking for it anyway. He's an academic All-American econ major. He's not going to screw it up for that. Paterno had not only the team trained, but the entire town of State College trained so well, they knew what the NCAA rules were. And you got these guys in the parking lot who've done all kinds of crazy crap, and they got a free rein to pick away these players. The irony was untold.
Were you ever in the Lash building and got to see where the alleged incident took place that Mike McQueary saw?
That is a surprising question, and yes, I have been. It is in the GA's locker room. And I was told by somebody who knew what was going on that this is his locker room. It's the end of the row of lockers, and there's a mirror right there, and through that mirror you can see the two-person shower, and it is chilling. It's undeniably creepy.
Do you think that's, based on where you were at, do you think it's possible that Mike actually saw what he saw?
Oh yeah. I mean, I can't look. I'm not a defense attorney or anyone else.
I'm
I
not,
put a
just
caveat.
from a general purpose.
You can see about a third to a half of the shower from that mirror. So wherever they're standing or whatever else is going on, your guess is as good as mine. But
There's 3 other teams in the book. We'll talk about them when we come back. You're watching For the Record on WHVL. Back with more right after this. Welcome back to For the Record. Our guest, John Bacon, author of Fourth and Long, The Fight for the Soul of College Football. John, every book always has detractors. There have been some things talked about, maybe some inaccuracies, some things that were discussed, and you've stated you've made a couple changes for the second edition already. But let's touch on them briefly, okay? The discussion about Silas Redd and Snoop Dogg. Just share with a little bit what the confusion is there about that story.
Well, check my notes, on August 28th of 2012, as well as on October 31st of 2012, several players, not one or two, brought this to my attention. They, of course, brought it up. I could not have known to ask that question, of course, and they told me that Silas Redd was picked up at the airport by Snoop Dogg, of course, and they've got no axe to grind here. They have been utterly reliable, and I stand by my sources and my reporting.
Okay, and another discussion was about Jay Paterno and the way he blew up at the team. Which game was it? Is that what was in question about the outburst that took place? It was just the...
That was the only question.
Right.
Is that all the players, the staffers, and the coaches that were around, all told me it was the Nebraska game.
Okay.
Kirk Deal, of course, very reliable guy, and John Urschel told me he and his teammates were 100% positive it's Nebraska, even a month ago. Okay. It's probably Illinois. Even Drew Estorino, my best source in that, is not 100% sure, but it's probably Illinois. The good news is it's already been changed. The really good news is it changes nothing.
Sure.
It's less than a page in the book, and Snoop Dogg, by the way, is 29 words. So.
And did you call him Snoop Dogg or Snoop Lion?
At the time we went to press, it was still Snoop Dogg.
Still Snoop Dogg. And the last thing that was discussed was about Athletic Director Dave Joyner and the discussion about going to a bowl game or not going to a bowl game. And basically the Athletic Director said, we should go to this bowl game. We need the money. Talk about that a little bit, if you would.
He made a financial argument to the players that we're going to need this money because they know that lawsuits are coming up and so on. My mistake entirely. I mentioned the sanctions 34 times in 28 pages from page 3 to page 338, I think it is. Right. I know the sanctions quite well, as I think you've already gathered. Yes. When we were talking to Zorge and Mahdi, somehow I popped that in there. My sequence is wrong. The $60 million, of course, came on July 23rd, 2012. I think everyone knows that at 10 o'clock on a Monday morning.
Yes, I believe many of us sat at our computers and watched that streaming press conference.
I was one of those many.
Yes,
exactly right. So that's a simple mistake and my mistake.
Now,
it's been changed.
Now, to switch gears a little bit, you did talk about 3 other schools in the book as well: Ohio State, Michigan, and Northwestern. Now, John,
I saw that look.
Now, John, when you think of football in the Big Ten, Northwestern is not where I would put in that group with Ohio State and Michigan and Penn State. Why did you select Northwestern? It's a great school, a fine educational institution, but not known for its football program.
Very true. In fact, what it is known for, as far as football goes, was the NCAA record for a long time, until I believe Columbia broke it.
Yes.
You don't want to be in a competition with Columbia for records with the NCAA, of course. Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, they are the 3 powers, clearly. They're the big 3 of the Big Ten. They're 3 of the 7 winningest programs in college football all time. The 3 biggest stadiums, the 3 biggest fan bases. That's broken down by the millions through Nate Silver. So it's all very impressive. They all had to deal with the NCAA in some fashion the last 2 or 3 years. They all had to fire their coach, or they all did in any case. So those speak for themselves. We talked to the players at Penn State mainly, the coach at Ohio State, the athletic director addressed that at Michigan. At Northwestern, we had the chance to put it all back together. I talked to the president, the AD, the head coach, Pat Fitzgerald, the star quarterback, of course, Kane Coulter, who's a pre-med major, and kind of wanted to see, okay, if you only get 2 and 3 stars, if you don't have any of the academic easier courses that other schools might have, what does it look like? Is it still possible? Can it still work? They, to me, were kind of the acid test. And if Northwestern can't compete, in some way we should all be pulling for Northwestern to a point.
Of course.
And that is that if they can't do it their way and be at least competitive, then it's taken one more big step towards a minor league. And of course, last year they went 10-3. Thrilling game against Penn State, that's in the book, and some amazing scenes that are behind the scenes. So 3 of my 4 teams all had historic years. Michigan, my alma mater, did not. So
that's okay. They're going to be pretty good this year, I think.
I think so.
Ohio State, Urban Meyer's the coach there now. With what's going on in the NFL now with Hernandez, it goes back now. A lot of people think it goes back to his time at Florida. What are the rumblings you're hearing behind the scenes, since you were part of in that sort of circle? What what were you hearing? How does Urban Meyer's style fit that it could have happened at Florida?
That's a good question. His graduation rate at Florida was second only to Vanderbilt's during those years, and occasionally he snuck past them, I believe. So a lot of things on paper look pretty good. Obviously, Hernandez is a disaster, is a tragedy, again. Furthermore, I think 41 of 120 or so players had been arrested at one point or other. Now, I will freely confess, by the way, I got arrested at age 20 for having a beer in a bar in Ann Arbor, so I'd be on that list. So you don't know what's on that list, but that's still a lot of people.
It's part of the college experience of all people, not just at Michigan or anything
I'm
like that.
afraid it was part of mine, I can say that.
Right.
But that said, that came out after the book went to press. What I do say about Ohio State, which does fit the model, is it's not win-at-all-cost programs, but they made the strongest bid for winning. They're the most unabashed about it. They put Jim Tressel on their shoulders between the first and second quarter of the Michigan-Ohio State game. This is the same guy he's why this team is not going to go to a BCS bowl game and maybe a national title game, and you're marching them around the field. I just don't see that happening at Northwestern, at Michigan, or at Penn State. So that was different. They're also at least concerned with appearances, I would say. So from this point on, I liked Urban Meyer a great deal. I thought he was direct, no bull, and he answered all my questions point blank. So I give him some points there. He will be on public opinion probation for the next 2 or 3 years, and I'm sure he knows it.
Sure. Now, we have about a minute left to go. Student athletes, you don't think they should be paid. You're okay with
I'm
the
old
fact
school.
that okay.
And I think most of the Penn State players were also. I think what you probably need to have eventually is a minor league system for those who don't want to be students, who shouldn't be students, who want to get paid. Hockey's got it, baseball's got it. You don't have the same problems in those sports at the college level.
NBA, developmental league, same type of thing.
It's starting to grow because they're going to realize sooner or later the one and done rule does not work.
Right. It becomes, you get the Caliparis of the world who come on in, I'm going to make you a star in a year.
This system rewards the wrong guys.
We have about 30 seconds left. Let's direct people to where you can get the book, and I'll show your website if you would.
Amazon.com, of course, is always popular. JohnUBacon.com. You can go right through there and find out more. I'll be updating my events list soon. And of course, Barnes & Noble right there at the hub and other places around town will be happy to sell you. They've got, I believe, hundreds if not thousands of books.
What's the next book you see that you're going to write?
Probably about the NC itself, which I believe will be a very popular topic here in State College.
I think it will be too. John Bacon, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you for watching For the Record. We'll be back with another edition very soon. Take care.